Mayor Kadis and Gene Curtis. God forgive me.
You get paid more than I do, but I'll take it.
They'll each have an allotted time for a presentation, and they'll each have 15 minutes afterwards for questions and answers. There will be microphones provided out in the audience by Mary Lou Wilton and Jennifer Stanley. If you'll raise your hands, I'll acknowledge you, and they'll come over to you for a microphone so that you can ask for questions. And then the city and county law enforcement and fire officials will speak all at once, and when they're done, there will also be time for questions for them. So we're going to ask you to keep your questions concise and short and to the point, because we are with limited time. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce each of our guests. Mike Kadis is our mayor of Missoula and has been since 1996. He's a former member of the Montana House of Representatives, where he served for 14 years. He has taught economics as an adjunct faculty at the University of Montana and worked as a carpenter for several years and operated his own construction business. He currently serves as a member of the Board of Directors of the Montana League of Cities and Towns, as well as the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors. It's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Mike Kadis.
Thank you, Vicki, and thank you to the Chamber and to all of you for attending. Margie. I want to introduce our City Council members, otherwise I get in a lot of trouble. Here are the ones I've seen. John Engen. John, can you stand up? There he is. Jerry Ballas. Clayton Floyd. Ed Childers. Jack Reedy. Jack is the president of the council. Did I see Ann Kazmierzak? No, I didn't. Any other council members? Lois Herbig, who is the vice president of the council. Okay, anyone else I dare to offend here? Okay, thank you. I want to just mention, oftentimes there is at least the perception that there's a tension between the administration and the council in all legislative bodies. And fact of the matter is there is. But the system's set up that way. There's supposed to be tension. But I really do think that we have a very good city council that works very well with the administration and the staff in the city. We do have controversies, and fact of the matter is we work through them. We're able to be civil with each other, and we get a lot done. And I just want to compliment the council for that and for their attitude, interest, and time that they put in helping to guide the city of Missoula. Now, as you heard, I have some training in economics, and this is perhaps my discussion is going to be a little premature since some of you are still eating. This is the kind of stuff that is more likely to put you asleep than to kind of keep you going, but I'll do my best. I do want to take some time and just talk about economic changes over the last 20 years in Missoula and nationally, and to look at some larger trends and how they have affected Missoula. So what I did was I looked at, I had my immense research staff do this actually, which means that I spent a lot of time on the computer yesterday. I took a lot of numbers from 1979 and I compared them with 1999, which is the most recent that I could get. Missoula County has grown by 21% over that time period. The Montana has grown by 12%, and the United States has grown by 21%. So Missoula has led Montana, but stayed about the same as the rest of the country. Growth in real income, the state has grown in terms of real income, so inflation adjusted, by 29% over that time period. Missoula by 49%, almost twice the rate of the state. and the U.S. by 64%, so another third higher than Missoula's, or actually a 50%, well, about a third. So, and then the other large client global statistic that I think is interesting, again, is growth in per capita personal income, and that's a number we've seen a lot. Montana has grown by 16%, Missoula by 24%, again a third higher, and the country as a whole by 35%, actually better than twice the growth in Montana. So what is it that is behind those types of major changes, particularly in personal income? And you can do the same kind of analysis with jobs and you'll end up with fairly similar numbers. You can do it with wages as well. What I did was I tried to look at the various industrial sectors of the economy and their shares of the total economy. And that's a fairly standard way of looking at how our economies are and how they change over time. The predominant feature that we see in the Missoula economy, the change over the 20 years, there are two things that have really happened in a significant way. First of all, the manufacturing portion of the economy has declined from over 19%, nearly a fifth, to less than 9%. So it has more than halved in terms of its overall effect on the economy, and almost all of that, 90% of that, is timber related. So that part of the economy has declined significantly. That has been counteracted by an increase, a significant increase, 14% increase in services. And services have an interesting reputation, but listen to the types of services that have increased. Most of it has been in healthcare. 7% of the 14% increase is healthcare, so half of it. The other two major contributors are business services and legal services. Collectively, healthcare, business services, and legal services account for 10.2% of the 14% increase in service production as a component of our economy. One last point as far as the Missoula economy that I think is very interesting and surprising. Retail has declined. As a share of the total economy, retail has gone from 13% to 12.7%. So even with Walmart and Costco and what is perceived as that giant sucking sound from the rural areas to the urban area, retail has stayed about the same. What's happened nationally? Interestingly enough, about exactly the same thing. Nationally, manufacturing in 1979 was nearly 25% of the total economy. Today, it's 16.2%. It's declined by a third. And in terms of services have increased from 17.5% to almost 30%. So exactly the same thing that's happened in Missoula that I think we have a lot of apprehension about is happening nationally. And believe me, there's been a lot of apprehension about it nationally. But the fact of the matter is, it is a kind of a shift that has happened, and we are a small enough piece of the national economy that we are driven by the national economy. So we shouldn't be surprised by these changes. The next thing I want to talk about, just look at, is a change in where our income comes from. We used to be primarily, well, we still are, wages and salary is where we get most of our money. 63% in 1979, that's declined to 57% of total income comes from wages and salaries. So a fairly substantial change. It's made up for by increases in rent, interest, dividends, and transfer payments. Again, a change away from, I think that probably mirrors the change away from manufacturing to services, but fewer people are actually earning their income, or earning as much income by working at a job. The last thing that I want to point out in terms of a national change that's happened over the last 20 years is the shift of the overall economy from rural and middle-sized area to metropolitan areas. Standard & Poor's with the U.S. Conference of Mayors reported last year that 80% of personal income in the American economy was created in metropolitan areas. And I think you've seen this even more so in the rise of the technology industries. They are all centered in large metropolitan areas. Research Triangle around in the south, Texas area, Austin, Houston, on the coast, Seattle, obviously, and then, of course, Silicon Valley. While it is a type of industrial use, in industrial creation that has the potential for being very dispersed, what we see in reality is it's very concentrated. And that's because those people need to be butting heads, and kind of sipping lattes together in order to come up with all the right ideas. But again, it reinforces the centrality, the need for centrality, and the value of having urban areas where large labor markets are present and where there are lots of urban amenities and people are congregating in the same places that create the critical mass for those kind of new ideas that have really fueled our economy over the last 10 years. So I guess, what does this mean for Missoula? First thing is, I think it means that we're going to continue to face growth pressures. Our ability to provide opportunities to absorb this growth is critical. It's critical both in terms of affordable housing and in terms of building new neighborhoods that work from the first day they're created and don't have to be retrofitted as time goes on, retrofitted for sewer, water, transportation, parks. All kinds of things that we are doing today, we're spending millions of dollars on today to try to fix problems that we didn't anticipate 10, 15, and 20 years ago. Sewer planning is critical. If we ignore sewer and planning, then what we're going to do is drive up costs in the long run. What we can do today is hold costs down. Sewer is the fundamental thing that makes affordability possible. Without sewer, all the new houses get built on 1 acre. With sewer, we build them on four dwelling units per acre, 6 dwelling units per acre, and we need as a community to find even higher densities. We need to figure out how to build, like lots of other urban areas in the country, 10, 20, even 30 dwelling units per acre. That's something that we have yet to learn how to do very well. We're afraid of it, but it can be done well, and I think if you go to particularly any growing, vibrant urban area in the country, you'll see new developments along those lines, and they work. The worst problem, I feel, if we don't plan, is we set ourselves up we create a social system that is largely dysfunctional. And by that, what we haven't done well in the past, and we've done okay, we've done better in a lot of places, but I know we can do better, is create neighborhoods. And the essence of a neighborhood is a place that's walkable. A neighborhood is where you can get basically most of your basic needs by walking. Now, there's an economic vitality and viability with that concept, but there's also a social impact there. The fact that if we create places where people walk, what happens is they see each other, they get to know each other. It's the difference between living in the university neighborhood, where you've got 6 dwelling units per acre and sidewalks that are tree-lined, and the pedestrians are not harassed by the automobiles. There's plenty of places for the automobiles, but pedestrians are encouraged to be out in the public arena, and as a consequence, they get to know each other. That is very different from a common suburban neighborhood where you have 1 or 2 dwelling units per acre, where oftentimes there aren't sidewalks, and in order to get anything, you have to get in a car. And so most of your reactions with other people are through 2 windshields. It's hard to build a social relationship with someone through 2 windshields. It's a lot easier to get to know that person you don't know if you're walking past them. That's what I mean when I talk about creating walkable neighborhoods. The other part of walkable neighborhoods is making sure that you create places for people to go. You create 5 minutes? Okay. we are going to pass a law, to ban not only using cell phones in cars, but to have them beeping, in the middle of a meeting. And I guess we're going to have to do it with battery-operated alarms too. We could have the beeping jihad, and so if your alarm goes off, whack off with your hand. No, we're not there yet. But I believe those are critical elements, creating the retail places and the civic places for people to get to know each other. And what that does over the long term is it creates that social fabric that allows us to work together. I mean, one of the great assets that Missoula has is that we all kind of know each other, even in this room. Most of the people who are in this room know each other in one way or another, or if they don't, you will get to know each other over time. I mean, it's a fact of the matter of living in this community. It's small enough that we're still capable of doing that, and it is built in a way that we come together. All income groups, all the differences kind of get mixed up. And that is really helpful in terms of solving problems and taking advantage of opportunities. We have to have that kind of a fabric in our community in order to survive really well into the future. It's a phenomenal asset. We need to cultivate it. The kinds of things that we look forward to then in terms of our economy, how we build our community, one of the key things is going to be transportation. And not just local transportation, that's important, but national transportation. And I'm thinking particularly here more in terms of the economy. And that's where our Missoula Airport Authority is critical. And I really want to compliment them for the work they've done planning, thinking about the future. But it is clear that the change in our economy to more service industries that create services for ourselves, but probably even more importantly, create services for export, are in a large way dependent upon a highly effective transportation system. Being able to fly in and out of Missoula on relatively short notice, conveniently and safely. And I think that the airport really has that in mind and has gone a long ways. Now, if you look at the growth rates at the airport, you see the same kind of thing happening. And it ties back into the way our economy is changing. It's more and more dependent on that kind of transportation flexibility. Of course, that leads to some land use issues. Thank you, Gary. How do we mix uses at the airport? And I think we're moving forward to doing that. We have had that conflict wherever we have built, the mix of uses, residential versus commercial versus retail. With the change in the economy, I think we are much more able to mix uses. We don't have to segregate, particularly commercial, from residential. In the past, we have wanted to separate, particularly because of the reputation of industrial. Industrial and residential didn't mix well. So we have the opportunity to mix, particularly residential, commercial, and retail. We have a couple of great places to do that. One is the downtown, where we have done a lot of that. We have some opportunities with the Champion site and with the Fox site to do an even better job of that. Where the greatest opportunity is for our community is in the Brook Street corridor, where we have a huge area that has been developed in a particular auto-centric way. I mean, you can go for about 1.5 miles out there and run into about 2 different intersections with crosswalks. We need to be able to find ways to get across that. Part of the way we do that is to encourage people to be on the street there and to encourage the density, both commercial, residential, and retail, in that area so that walking, there are things to get when you walk. That, I think, is one of the biggest things that we have to look forward to in our community is how we revitalize that Brook Street corridor. It is going to change over the next 10, 15 years, as most of those buildings come to the end of their viable economic use. We are starting a planning process, and I hope that you will be involved in that as we look to how can we really refill or intensify all of the uses in that area. I think that is a central place to Missoula's future viability. It says my time is up. Thanks, Gary, which means I am glad to take questions at this point.
job of the city government to cultivate or govern society's interaction? Why do you think that should be the role of the city government?
I don't think it's our job to govern interactions by any means. I think it is our job to cultivate interactions. Okay, the question is, why do I think it is the city's job to cultivate or govern social interactions? And the reason that I think that the city has an express interest in cultivating interactions is because when people know each other and work with each other, we end up, it benefits everybody. It creates a greater whole, and I think that is valuable to everybody. In the same way that when we have schools, and we all pay for schools, those schools educate everybody. It's not just something we do for a select few. And we do that because we understand that having a populace of well-educated people adds to the value of everyone. So for that, those types of reasons, I think is critical. Other questions?
Mike, one of the things, kind of follow on to that question. The National Home Builders Association did a survey several years ago and put out a piece on smart growth. And they did surveys, national surveys of what consumers and homeowners wanted, in their living locations. And 82%, I believe it was, of the public opposed high-density development and the infilling with apartment complexes in neighborhoods. And they went on to say that they would drive, 30 to 40 miles if need be to prevent living in those type of houses. So if that's the case, and I'm sure that your planners are aware of those type of numbers, why does the city and county government continue to persist in pushing high-density housing when the public clearly opposes it?
Well, I think first of all, it depends on, those surveys depend very much on how you ask the question. Second, I think you'll find the National Home Builders Association pretty active in smart growth these days. They have found that there is a market there, regardless of how the old question was phrased. The people are making money in higher density units. I actually took a tour of one here in Missoula just yesterday, and they have sold 7 of their parcels as yet unbuilt. So actually 7 homes. So I think I think there is a market for it. The other thing is, I think we need to look back at how we are built and the places that we like in our community today. And I think you take any measure, the university area, the west side, our areas, the lower Rattlesnake, areas that were built a long time ago in Missoula, 50, 60, 70 years ago. Very high increases in value in property. People do like living in those areas. And that's not to say that everyone wants to live in that kind of a neighborhood. And it's not to say that we think that 30 dwelling units per acre is what everything should be. But what I believe we need is more of a mix. If you look at the development that's happened over really from 1980 to about 98 or so, most of that was 2 dwelling units per acre or more. Essentially, we are creating a monoculture because we were driven by the notion that that's the only thing that we can do. We didn't build any higher density neighborhoods in that time, or very few. And I think that one of the things we need to do is get back to looking at a more diverse mix. Anyone else?
Another one on the same vein. In 1999, the state legislature had mandated that the cities and counties go through a growth planning process and come up with a growth plan. And under MCA 766601, and that mandates meetings, hearings, planning for business growth, planning for the economy. As I understand it, I don't believe that we've done that yet in local government. Could you comment on what the plans are and when the city county will have a unified transportation and growth plan put together so we can look at what the long-range plan is for the area?
Well, we do have a transportation plan. We adopted a major transportation plan in 1996. We are in the process right now of updating that, and I would encourage everyone to participate in that. In terms of the Growth Management Act, the county is currently starting that process, and I believe they hope to adopt the overall county plan sometime this summer. So that will be in front of us to a large degree over the course of the next 6 months. I think it's hard to compare with other places around the country in terms of planning, but I think if you look at places around Montana, I think Missoula has done fairly well in terms of planning. And while we don't have all the elements in place that meet the letter of the law, in terms of the practical ability to think about where we're going, I think we've done pretty well. What will be adopted is an overarching umbrella with lots of pieces that fit in underneath it. Those pieces that fit in underneath it many of them are already there. There are some additional ones that we need to do, like the Y. Mullen plan, and we need to finish up with the Lolo plan. But the umbrella will be something that is required by law. I question how necessary the umbrella is in the first place, but that's how they did it in Helena.
I'm not sure how you can develop a transportation plan that you did in 1996 unless you have a growth plan that's been developed at the same time so that we know, where the growth is going to go. And I would suggest that you grossly underestimated the amount of time I was involved in this process in Washington when growth management was passed in the early 90s in order to get our plans and that in place. It took almost 2 years for the city county governments to come up with the plan, take it to the public, have the meetings, do the things that's mandated under the law. And I'm not sure how we're going to do that in this short a time frame.
Well, I think growth and transportation do move together, and it's important to do them together. In terms of the amount of time to adopt the growth management plan, that is not something the city or the county has any control over, really. That is something that is dictated to us by the state. We argued that the state was creating a time frame that was unattainable, and we're going to do our best to get to it. But we won't be able to do the kind of job that we did, say, with the city-county urban area comprehensive plan, a plan that took about 2.5 to 3 years to develop. But the fact of the matter is, the way the legislation is written, we are under the gun to actually put this on paper and get it done. And if we don't, then there are consequences in terms of future zoning. So I think that we'll do as well as we can with that, but the kind of situation we've been handed isn't particularly amenable. Karen?
Mayor, you said that Missoula has grown 21%, and yet when we listen to the university's projections of economic growth, they are talking 1.5 and 2.5% increase. Are they talking Western Montana and you're just Missoula? But I mean, how would there be such a difference in their projection?
Well, that's 21% over 20 years, so that's 1% a year.
Oh, okay.
Those numbers are annual numbers, I think. So, I anticipate Missoula, continuing to grow at least at 1% a year. One of the things that I really worry about is if you look around us at neighboring communities this size, what you see in this size and bigger, Boise, Spokane, Ogden, even areas around Salt Lake, you see 3 and 4% annual growth rates. And I think we are challenged to deal with 1 and 2%. And if we were struggling to deal with 3 and 4%, the level of political discourse would be much more intense than it is now, and the quality of the things that we were able to do would be much less. I see Gary fidgeting with his cards.
Mr. Mayor,
Gary.
can you explain or define affordable housing in Missoula?
Gary asks if I can explain or define affordable housing in Missoula. It's interesting. I think if you compare housing prices to, let's say, 12 or 13 years ago, what we have today in almost all cases is clearly unaffordable. If you compare housing prices with national averages, we're at about, our housing is about 90%, 96% of the national average. So median sales price. So that seems, reasonably affordable. The census brought out some interesting numbers. The amount of rental vacancy rate was, I think, between around 4% a year, but the housing vacancy rate was much lower. And I think that kind of tension in the market is one thing that does create much higher housing costs. I mean, essentially, you're able to reap some monopoly profits because someone has got to buy a house, and if there's a low vacancy rate, there's not very much to choose from. So prices go up to resolve that problem. I think what's commonly accepted as affordable housing in Missoula today is $100,000. And that is a huge, to do that, to get into a $100,000 house with like a 5% down payment, I think, and a Board of Housing mortgage, you're probably looking at $800 a month, maybe $850. I could have one of the realtors in the audience confirm my numbers, which I think is pretty tough. And because Missoula has such a low home ownership rate, about 50% compared to the statewide average of 67% and a national average of a little higher than that, that's a huge problem for us, is being able to create more opportunities for home ownership. But I guess one of the things that I think is important is it's not just what you're paying on that mortgage, it's what you pay to operate and live in that home. And so if you have to spend 30 or 40 minutes a day commuting and spend thousands of dollars a year buying tires, or cars, that makes that house unaffordable in some marginal way. So it's important for us to consider that as we are encouraging the development of new neighborhoods. Again, I think sewer is absolutely critical to creating affordable ground, and I think higher densities are important as well. We have a history in this community long ago of building at 4 or 6 dwelling units per acre, and we got away from that and started building at 1 and 2 dwelling units per acre. And I really think in terms of the long-term viability of our valley, we're just not going to be able, we're going to sprawl ourselves all the way to all of the buildable areas in this valley over the next 20 or 30 years unless we're able to build ourselves more compactly. I think there's lots of social value in that. I think there's lots of economic value in that. And the fact of the matter is, if we don't do that, then it is going to be very, very expensive in the long term for our children and their children to be able to purchase houses. Because what they'll have to be doing, eventually sewer will come to those places because we'll have mucked up the groundwater enough with 1 dwelling unit per acre. But we'll be doing all retrofitting. We'll have to tear up roads to put the sewer in. We'll have to do very funky subdivisions in order to accommodate the one house that's already on that acre. And so I think we're just a lot better off in the long term if we can think about urban areas and build a city as we go now and try to do that on the edge of the city or inside the city. We know we're going to grow, no question about it. Let's try to think about it, think about how we do it, and make the best place we can in the long term. And there's a certain amount of social planning that goes on here, and I know that's a dirty word for some people, but I think if you look at the costs and of some of the mistakes that we've made, right now we're going to be rebuilding 39th Street, a $4 million SID in order to retrofit a storm sewer in that area that should have been done long, long ago. We've spent tens of millions of dollars in the Reserve Street area retrofitting sewer into there. We're spending tens and 20s of millions of dollars on road networks. We are probably going to be buying new right-of-way in the Russell Street corridor. I know we're going to be buying new right-of-way in the area bounded by 3rd, Russell, Reserve, and the river. Those are expensive things to do, to have to come in and do them after everything is kind of all there, or after much of it is all there. And we can avoid those costs to our community if we think about it beforehand. One more question.
You haven't said much, addressed much about the business community. It's about the residential, but you aren't going to have the children here living here because they don't have a place to work. What's your plan to help the businesses? Instead of restrictions, what can you do to make it easier for businesses to come in? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Gary says my time is up, but I want to answer that, okay? Yeah. I think what I've tried to say today is that the way the national economy is changing is the way we are going to change. And what that means to me is that more commercial service type related businesses, and those are the types of businesses that we can incorporate into the urban area, and we should try to find ways to do that. Particularly, I'm mentioning the Brook Street corridor, but there are other places as well. In terms of manufacturing, I think we have great opportunities in terms of the airport. That is an ideal place for heavier use type industrial uses where noise is not an issue. And so I think we have the capability, the supply to do those sorts of things. The key thing that I think the city and the county, the key role they play is making available, A, properly zoned land, and B, appropriate infrastructure. That's where we are the most effective in terms of the resources that we have, and that's what I think we should be focusing on, rather than trying to go out and lure somebody in, with tax breaks or that sort of thing. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent. It's now my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Jean Curtis. She was elected County Commissioner in November of 2000. She's lived in Missoula her whole life, having grown up in the Seeley Lake area, and attended St. Patrick's School of Nursing. Prior to being elected the County Commissioner, most of her professional work was in early childhood education, grown children, and in her spare time she likes to read, quilt, and garden. Please join with me in welcoming Jean Curtis.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Missoula County, I'd like to thank the Chamber for again sponsoring this event. I think it's an important one. I'd like to introduce my fellow commissioners, Barbara Evans, and I don't know where Bill's sitting. Bill Carey is in the back there. And there are quite a few county employees here, but I didn't see the list, so I don't know who all they are. So wave, I guess. The county budget looks good. We just went through our exit audit for fiscal year 2001 this week, and the difficult decisions that were made for that budget year succeeded in improving our financial condition markedly in just 1 year. The general fund equity increased from $257,201 at the end of fiscal year 2000 to $2,096,057 at the end of FY 2001. We were able to reinstate some of the positions that were cut in that year, and yet the 2002 fiscal year budget will further increase our reserve. So we have that back on track. There's a handout that you were given as you came in, I believe, that has some budget charts if you kind of want to see how the budget is broke down across different service areas. Also in the handout is a fact and figure sheet with a little information behind the majority of the departments in the county. To give a full report, I'd have to be here all day, and I don't think we have the room that long. So I thought I'd just highlight a few things. Now I want you to remember that the mayor's background is economics and mine is human services, so we'll have a different perspective, but that's probably good. Missoula Aging Services is one of the agencies that the county collects money for, and they provide an umbrella for many programs serving our senior citizens. The Missoula County voters approved a levy to provide an annual support for our aging community. Aging Services has recently purchased and is remodeling the old River House building on Stevens. They plan for it to be available for community use also. The capital campaign is underway, and I'm sure donations are welcome, and if you ask Debbie and Susan, I'm sure they have envelopes in their purse. I'd just like to highlight a little bit of some of the programs that they do, because these seniors that are served through that these programs are amazing. They continue to give back. Through the RSVP program for youth and education, there are 149 volunteers that have served 7,934 hours. For basic human needs, 227 volunteers served 16,968 hours. As you can tell, Aging Services gets paid by keeping good records. For governmental agencies, 49 volunteers served 2,970 hours. For culture and arts, 83 volunteers served 2,184 hours. For community programs, 62 volunteers served 4,584 hours. And for senior independence, 331 volunteers served 22,330 hours. Every program that they have has numbers like that. The foster grandparent program has 45 grandparents, served 35,000 hours for 400 kids in Missoula County. Over 75% of those kids made a significant progress. The senior companions, 35 volunteers, volunteered 30,000 hours for 200 seniors. This allowed 80% of those people to stay in their homes rather than move to a assisted living facility. Meals on Wheels volunteers delivered 64,000 meals and drove 63,000 miles, enough to go around the world almost 4 times. So those of us that are when we reach retirement age, there's always something for us to do. The mayor touched on the airport authority, and that was one of the questions that they had directed to me also. They were successful in bringing United Airlines into Missoula, which I believe that the demand proved even higher than they expected. This gives us direct flights to Denver now, which is very good for economic development in this area. And the airport is planning for the future demands, especially in general aviation, which is the smaller private aircrafts. So they are now applying for federal dollars to purchase additional land to the west of the airport for a parallel runway, which will better serve the community, and especially those small planes. The commissioners are in favor of this planning because it's always better to plan for something like that rather than do like Tacoma and Chicago and Denver and have to purchase houses and knock them down. So the airport authority, the planning staff, and the elected officials in the city and the county will continue to communicate together and work together as we plan, because of course that is an area identified for housing growth also. The Missoula City-County disaster plan is very thorough. The anthrax scares put it to the test this year, and it served us well. Public health will now be even more involved in the emergency planning, however. The health department is currently conducting training on bioterror agents for first responders, public health staff, and public officials in the area. Using the Army's data, they are considered the experts since they dreamed up and used some of this stuff. The next speakers will address that issue from their perspective. One other thing that we're doing in emergency service type planning is using 15% of the federal forest receipts that we receive from the federal government to create a countywide program to develop more fire-resistant communities throughout the county. This program will be similar to the successful program that's been going on in the Frenchtown area, and will collaborate with local fire departments and community groups. And our emergency services director will administer that program. With the new way that we get our federal forest receipts, we know that we will have a constant amount of money for the next 6 years, so that allows us to do some better planning. Last year, Missoula County received $6 million in grants for a wide variety of needs. In your handout is a chart that shows some of the things that we do with grants here. We have very effective grant writers, and when we collaborate with other agencies, we can make a little bit of money go a long way. In 1885, in the midst of a smallpox outbreak, the City Council of Missoula, Montana Territory established a health board to watch over the health of our citizens. Public health responsibilities have grown immensely from that day. The public health nurses still go into neighborhoods and homes with a multitude of services with health issues at the center and connect with all kinds of helping hands in the community. Unfortunately, the 2001 legislature diverted some money that we had been used to receiving, the DUI task force money that we had always used for DUI prevention that's funded by drunk drivers, and the tobacco prevention money that came from the big tobacco lawsuit. Both of those funds of money were diverted for other purposes. So these programs had been very successful here, and the money had previously been earmarked for that. So hopefully in the next session we'll be able to convince the state that that money should come back to the local communities where it does the most good. The state also cut the Partnership to Strengthen Families money. Recent cutbacks in the Department of Health and Human Services has forced the Health Department to cut the outreach nurse that we had out at the Public Assistance Office, which was a great place to have a public nurse. And of course, the environmental side of the Health Department focuses on water quality, air quality, septic systems, public water systems, etc. There are two Superfund sites in Missoula County, the one behind the Milltown Dam and the one where the White Pine and Sash lumber mill used to be. Both are public health concerns. The Missoulian did a great job on giving an overview of the Milltown Dam so that you don't have to attend a lot of meetings. You can sit down and read that to find out and formulate your opinion on that. But we do continue to be involved. We met with the governor's natural resource director this week and hope to have a settlement on that this spring. Unfortunately, EPA's purpose and focus is only to restore the land and the environment. Health-related issues of the people affected by environmental messes are not addressed by them. So those who worked at White Pine and Sash have concerns that need to be addressed, and the Health Department is involved in that process. The development park out by the airport had another successful year. The majority of the sales in the development park have been to existing Missoula businesses relocating to this industrial park. I think when the park was originally envisioned, we thought we would draw people here, and we are doing some of that, but it's interesting that most of it has been relocation. We are pleased that there was a hockey team that wanted a hole in the ground, and we had a really nice one to sell them. And so by this fall, hopefully, we will have a hockey league here. In 2001, we sold 69 acres for over $1.5 million, and I urge you to take a drive out there this spring when the snow leaves and it greens up to see how nice the sidewalks and boulevards look. The project is really living up to the master plan. The Missoula Public Library has over 50,000 active users, and they sign up a new person for a library card every 24 minutes. Somebody did a lot of math to figure that out. Parks and trails and open space have an economic contribution to communities that is really hard to calculate. They're not just nice to look at or to play sports, but they improve our quality of life, offer stress relief, improve air and water quality, and wildlife habitat. In a competitive market, a great place to live is a big drawing card for attracting good employees and attracting businesses here. And if you think about the value, the land value, I'm sure, I'm not a realtor, but I know there are some here, that a house sitting across the street from Bonner Park is probably of more value than one that isn't anywhere near a park. So sometimes we think they're a luxury, but they, as the mayor said earlier, are part of planning. In 2001, the County Park Board awarded over $27,000 in matching funds to 15 community organizations to help park improvements across the county. Partnership Healthcare was formed 10 years ago by volunteers to address the need for affordable housing and healthcare, or affordable healthcare for people who don't have houses sometimes in Missoula. Volunteers are still key, and there are hundreds of volunteers in medical, dental, and mental health professions that donate time every year in the center and in their own offices. This year, the Health Center was accredited by the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, and that was a big task. Their homeless program, you probably read about recently in the paper, has touched the 500 people who are homeless in Missoula. 75% are not transients, they are from Missoula. Planning and Grants Office continues to keep very busy. As I said, we've received lots of grants. They are also busy with plans, and as the mayor said, we hope to have, it's just an umbrella. Our growth policy has to be an umbrella that will refer to a lot of documents and have lots of things filled in later. Some plans, like the 1998 Urban Comprehensive Plan, really aren't out of date, so they'll be referred to. That will be done by July, and by February of next year, we hope to have the Y-Mullen Plan to Planning Board. We continue to do large subdivisions, and in response to concerns by developers, Cindy Cletty, the director, instituted a monthly meeting with realtors, builders, and developers, the chamber staff, and others to discuss issues, and it has been very helpful and does continue once a month. I'm looking at Gary's thing there. He's going to flip at me in a minute. That card with 1 minute on it or something. So the county budget is in good shape, but I believe it's important to look at other indicators for the state of the county. Most of us who live here enjoy a certain quality of life that we enjoy, and it attracts other people to come here. But we often take this for granted and don't really think about it too much, or whether or not all of our neighbors enjoy the same quality of life. It has been said that the health of a community is measured by the way we care for our young and our elderly, and hopefully if we're caring for both those segments of the population, people in between are cared for too. A recent United Way report says 23% of the children in Missoula County live in poverty, 542 people are homeless, 17% of our elderly live in poverty, and there were 228 cases of physical and/or sexual abuse against children. Housing costs, of course, we know are out of proportion for the wages earned by many families. While Missoula does an incredible job of collaborating with youth and collaborating for youth programs and health and human services, there are still people who are left out. One of the things that's going to happen this fall is we're going to lose $3 million in grants that we have been using to target kids. The after-school programs, targeting at-risk. The early indicators show that those programs are very successful, and our youth are strengthened through that. It makes kids more resilient, gives them skills, makes them grow up and get jobs. So our challenge will be to sustain these types of programs. Missoula is successful at doing amazing, expensive things. We have a wonderful carousel, we have a great children's theater, we have purchased mountains, we saved the Randolph homestead. The list goes on, but we have to make youth programs, Meals for the Hungry, and lots of human services things a priority. One of the things I'd like to focus on for a minute is volunteers in the community. Missoula County appoints citizens to 29 different advisory boards. There are 150 people serving on those boards. And according to the independent sector, a coalition of nonprofits, the value of their services is rendered is figured at $15.29 an hour, which is over $82,000. So they really do make a difference. When we sit in our nice home that we worked hard for, and we surely deserve, it's easy to forget that family living out there, these signs are awful. There are families living out of their cars because they can't pay the rent. When we're complaining about needing to have a root canal, it's hard to think about the 1,600 people who have been on a waiting list for over a year at Partnership Healthcare because their tooth hurts. When we gripe because the snowplow just pushed our driveway shut that we just shoveled and our four-wheel drive can barely get out, we forget that there are people who don't have a car, that it just died. And when we go to the grocery store to stock up and buy prescriptions and have a little copay, it's easy to forget that the elderly who need someone to give them a ride there has to choose between food and prescriptions. I'm almost done. So none of us have a magic wand to wave and fix everything. While government plays an important role, we can't do it alone. Compassion must be a community value in order to make a difference. So I'm ready for questions. You guys must have run out talking to the mayor.
Speaking of the development out by the airport,
Yes.
can you tell us the nature of the housing development that's going in out there? One question I have is it on the sewer? And another question is just the reasoning behind the housing going in with all the businesses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, that, it is on the city sewer, and I believe that's probably, is that the one you toured this week?
No.
Oh, okay. Because we got to
Well-
tour a couple of the houses, is it Perry Ashby's?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that section of the development park was set aside as a reserve piece, and when Westmont Builders, Perry Ashby, came forward and with a proposal to put housing there, the way the park is designed, there won't be any industrial next to him. The plan for the park in the land next to him is actually for technology and those types of businesses. What that project allows a developer to do is to plan a neighborhood. So he's able to lay out all the streets. You're not going around anything that's already there. You can make the houses on smaller lots so people can afford them. And when people say the statistics, I used to agree with the same thing, that people don't want to live on those little bitty lots. But when they sell before they're built here, we know there's a demand. And sometimes it's the first house. Maybe they want bigger. It might be the kids have already grown up house. I have 2 bedrooms empty in my house now, and I get tired of cleaning it, so, you know, you downsize as they get older. So it is a nice development, and it will work. At the edge of the development, there will be live-work situations where you could live upstairs and have a bakery or a barber shop or something below. So that's what the housing project is. And it is affordable, and they've worked out some great financing, and it's a nice project. Other questions?
Commissioner Curtis, I've been reading the articles in the newspaper about the Milltown Dam, and it suddenly struck me that we've got a total role reversal in this issue. We have a mining company that is saying we don't want to proceed with this project because it's too risky and it's too expensive, and yet we've got the county commissioners and the health department that seem to be saying we want the project to go ahead while we're still not sure of what the EPA's recommendation is going to be. We have wetland issues that haven't been addressed. We have air quality and water quality issues that seem to be very risky. And yet at the other end of the valley, we have a sewer project going in that seems to be forced on these people, as some people have objected to. How does the county address that seemingly dichotomy of policy here, where we're going ahead without, in a very risky operation, yet on the other one we're putting the sewer out there in the name of water quality protection?
In the county's mind, they are both water quality issues, and they are both to protect the environment, and the Milltown removing the sediments is not risky but safe. I had the opportunity to go to Wisconsin in June to view, in Wisconsin they've taken out over 700 dams. And we got to go view a dredging operation and see what they did with their, the hazardous waste. It isn't really hazardous waste, it's sediments. In other words, it doesn't hurt you to touch it. Their sediments had similar things in it, but they didn't have arsenic, they had lead. If you watch the underground video of the dredger working, you never lose sight of the auger, which looks kind of like on a snowblower. It's like a snowblower with a big vacuum on it, and it doesn't disturb the water. The Army Corps of Engineers did a study, says it's feasible, says it won't raise the risks any higher than an ice flow does. In fact, it won't as much. The one thing that will stir up the water more is when you happen to run into an old rusty car body or a tree root or some tires and that kind of thing. So if those can be pulled out separate. So I think both issues are water quality protection, and we have said all along we wouldn't go forward if we didn't believe it was safe.
Commissioner Curtis, as earlier stated, there is not currently a growth policy in Missoula County. Therefore, the only types of zoning people can get for their land are emergency zoning and, what was the other one?
Citizen initiated.
Citizen initiated. My understanding is citizen initiated zoning takes a 40-acre parcel, and both types can be overturned at a later date. They're, in a sense, temporary. Can you tell me how, since 1999, when the legislation passed, with a time frame of having counties get something implemented by 2001, why we don't have a growth policy at this point?
Well, I would imagine it's the same reason that no other county in the state has a growth policy at this point. I just reported on how our budget is now back on track. It wasn't. We didn't have staff there to do that. There were lots of other issues. The county has, the number of subdivisions in the county has completely swapped with the number that the city used to have. It used to be there, and now it's in the county because that's where the land is. And so there are timelines required by law that if somebody brings us a subdivision and has met, certain criteria and has everything ready, that we have to bring those before the commissioners within 60 days. So that's where the focus of the planning staff had to go. Unfortunately, we don't have one in place. Like I said, nobody else in the state does either. We believe that we can get the umbrella done in 6 months that will have implementation tools and allow us to use documents that are existing and just continue on. We will adopt the LOLO plan then under the growth plan. So the regional plans will actually be the documents that give us the individual things that are going to happen. And any kind of zoning can be amended. Even regular zoning can be in the future changed. We don't want it to only be that kind of zoning, and believe it will get done.
Speaking of zoning, on that Perry Ashby project, I was told that all of the land between the Perry Ashby project and Reserve Street that is not built on at this time has been zoned for single-family homes. So that even though it seems like it's way out now, it will just be a part of a flow once that land becomes available and is developed. Is that accurate?
The land between Perry Ashby's project and Westview Village, I believe, is zoned for housing, but not along like where Carl Tyler's building and
No, because
the rest.
that's already developed. I was talking about the bare land that's between.
That is zoned for housing.
And is that single family or multi-family, do you know?
I'm not sure. I know that we just approved one piece of property for single family.
Jean, as Mrs. Montana, I represent the married women and children here in Montana, and it definitely concerned me when you said that there was a loss of $3 million towards children in our community. Is there a plan established as of now to make up that difference? And you also mentioned volunteering and how essential that is to our community. Is that a huge part of that plan?
There are many agencies involved here for children and youth, the flagship program, the public schools, and lots that are involved in that whole $3 million that's about to come up. If you read the paper today, I didn't have time to read much, but I did read that the president is thinking about taking some of the after-school program money to use it for college grants or something. So it's that kind of thing. The federal dollars are being refocused. September 11th changed lots of people's focus, And some programs now, like the 21st Century grants that Missoula has applied for more than once, and they're very hard to get, we haven't succeeded. But the 21st Century money will now be run through the state, so that could have a whole different, we'll get less money. And so there isn't any, I know that all the agencies are trying to decide, does the community have the capacity to start funding some of these things ourselves? All of these programs get money from United Way, so you don't want to go take United Way's contributors away because, you know, we want to be careful not step on each other's toes. We have to figure out what our capacity is. So all those agencies, yes, are trying to brainstorm and figure out what are the things that they would cut first and that kind of thing. But it is a concern. Did I get all your questions? I think so. How many minutes I got left, Gary?
About 4.
The one thing I didn't address in my 20 minutes because I didn't have time is the Mullen Road sewer project, and I know that's a concern. One of the most challenging aspects of developing public policy is balancing community values with individual values. I don't believe there's any doubt that the Missoula community values clean water and know we must protect the aquifer. However, the community goal of protecting clean water we value is very often at odds with the willingness of individuals in the community and their capacity to implement and pay for the infrastructure needed to protect it. We do have a history of taking a strong stand to protect water quality. In November of 1988, Missoula Valley became the very first metropolitan area along the Clark Fork to ban the sale of phosphorus detergents. If you haven't lived here that long, you don't remember that you couldn't buy, you know, there was a big thing about whether or not you could buy those soaps. This resulted in a 40% reduction in phosphorus discharge. This spring, the city will begin construction on the biological nutrient removal unit at the city wastewater treatment facility. This will reduce the discharge of nitrates by 60% and phosphates by an additional 50%. The public sewer system is being extended to East Missoula and the East and West Reserve area to reduce nitrates, contributed to the aquifer by reducing the number of septics in the valley. Extending public sewer service to the Mullen Road corridor is the next step needed to protect our sole source aquifer. That area, there was a 6-year growth management plan that you can ask Barbara about because she says she doesn't ever want to do a 6-year study. And again, that was identified. If you look around the valley, that is the place that's growing, that is the natural place to grow, and it's cheaper to put infrastructure in before there's houses in the way. We realized that the plan that went out to the public, even though 66% of the people did not protest, so it was a minority that protested, there are still segments of people that are affected financially in a big way. Last month I went over and talked to the mayor and said, has the city got an extra $1 million? And he laughed at me. But he said the city might consider $1 million if the money could go to be directed towards the existing plumbed units, the houses that are already there. But we didn't know if that was legal, you know, whether you can focus money, if that, you know, if there was some legalities there. We've now worked out that it can be done. The City Council Committee of the Whole a couple weeks ago took a straw vote and said, go ahead and go work with that number and see if we can make it work and make it affordable for people. This week we've been briefed on what that would do. We can reduce, we would have to stop the project that we're voting on next week. We would have to change the assessment method so the large landowners still pay square footage, but the plumbed units would pay a flat fee. The amount of money they pay is $2.4 million of the project. So if you take off $1 million, you've dropped it down to almost half. You divide that by the number of units out there, and we come up with about $1,500. If you had one house, 1 acre, you pay $1,500. If you had 20 acres and one house, you'd pay $1,500. That would be the backbone cost. That would allow us to go to Washington DC and try to get federal money for the $5 million that it's going to take for all the sub-districts and reduce their costs in that. We figure we can do it about 50%. So we're continuing to follow up on that and hope to bring that plan forward. The only thing is, it only takes one lawsuit to throw it all off, and we believe we've made it work. What would happen then is if you have 20 acres and in the future you decide to subdivide it, you would pay $1,500 for every additional house you put on there, and that money would go back to the city. So I hope that that gives, the newspaper had it just a little bit confused today because they hadn't seen the briefing that we did. So, thank you.
Police Department. The Montana Homeland Security Task Force, created by Governor Marks in October of last year, just completed their Domestic Preparedness Strategy Report. That document identified Missoula County as third in the state, behind Yellowstone and Gallatin County in vulnerability. That rating was based on population, response resources available, and the threat level. Also taken into consideration was the response time for our hazmat teams and our explosive ordnance disposal capabilities. Billings and Missoula are the only two cities in the state that have, or county, have joint hazmat and bomb teams. As a police responder, we feel our greatest vulnerability is not the events such as those witnessed on September 11th, but lie more within the threats such as mail tampering, chemical or biological substances transported to Missoula or through Missoula by various means. We are probably more vulnerable geographically in the sense that we are located on a major east-west interstate system, permitting organized terrorist or a lone perpetrator to accidentally expose our community to a terrorist event. As we all, as we all know, Missoula is a hotspot for controversial issues such as abortion, environmental, animals' rights, just to name a few. Here we go again. This leads it to the potential threat of a copycat type act of violence, which is considered a terrorist act. The Missoula Police Department is actively involved with other agencies such as the Missoula County Sheriff's Department, Missoula City Fire, Missoula Rural Fire Departments, emergency medical responders, to coordinate and develop a protocol for responses for assistance, such as suspicious mails that we've had the past couple months. We are also engaged in providing training for our personnel, including health department training that's currently going on, to identify biological agents and how they pose a threat to us. The Department of Justice is involved in training with us in the form of identifying and detecting suspected terrorist activity and suspicious persons. Myself and Under Sheriff Mike McMeekin are currently being cleared for classified federal intelligence information that we will be passing on to our officers. The State Office of Emergency Management is in the process of allocating monies for our department to purchase first responder equipment, such as protective clothing, Tyvek suits, and breathing apparatuses for our bomb technicians. Additional monies are being utilized for training and training exercises we'll be performing. I was asked if the City Police Department has a preparedness plan. No, we do not. But Missoula City and County have a disaster plan that incorporates natural disasters and criminal events, which include any acts of terrorism. Within the plan, there are objectives and strategies addressing emergency, everything from the ice jams in '96 to the largest chlorine spills in the United States, in Alberton, to the bombing that a man blowing himself up with a bomb in downtown Missoula. Missoula Department is the lead agency in the plan for all criminal activities within the city, And we play a supportive role in other lead agencies in the chemical, biological, and nuclear arena. Our goal in domestic preparedness is to be on the cutting edge of available training, technology, intelligence, and equipment. To continue our diligent effort to be able to mitigate an event, to help our citizens help themselves in a time of crisis, and to speed recovery in any event. To obtain that goal, we must not pass up any opportunity for firsthand experience. And I'm proud to announce tomorrow morning, 16 of our officers are leaving Missoula for the Winter Games in Salt Lake City. They will be assigned to protect the athletes and citizens in several venues against acts of violence. Our assistance was specifically requested by Utah officials due to our performance during the Hells Angels visit. The Missoula Police Department is the only non-Utah municipality to be asked to assist in the Olympic Games. The hands-on experience Thank you. The hands-on experience, the techniques and tactics deployed for the first world event since 9/11 will prove invaluable to this community of Missoula. So if you have any questions, any follow-ups, I'll be happy to answer them after the others.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our Missoula County Undersheriff Mike McMeekin. Mike has been Jan's husband for over 30 years. He's Shannon and Aaron's dad, Larry and Brent's father-in-law, and he has 4 great-grandkids that call him Papa: Matthew, Isaiah, Hannah, and Brianna. The other stuff in his life is that he's been a career Montana law enforcement officer since 1972. He was with the Lincoln County Sheriff's Department from 72 to 79, has been with our own Missoula County Sheriff's Department since 1979, and is currently the undersheriff. And Mike apparently introduced himself at the Montana Law Enforcement Academy as the old bald guy, so it's my pleasure to introduce the old bald guy. You're welcome.
One point of clarification for those of you who thought we may have skipped a generation: we have 4 grandchildren who are great. We're anticipating grandchildren or great-grandchildren, but I think that should be a few years off yet. You may have witnessed an historic event today. 3 career emergency responders, 1 plate of cookies, no casualties. I'm proud of these 2. I'm also proud to stand here today and tell you that the Missoula County Sheriff's Department is in a state of responsible animation, but not crisis. And to put that in context so you don't think we're a cartoonish operation, we use the dictionary definition for animation, which is that we are filled with spirit, courage, and resolution. And yes, our lives did change since September 11th, and our lives will continue to change. We're addressing the current challenges. Obviously, we are anticipating some new challenges, and thanks to a trip to Helena yesterday, the good chief and I had the opportunity to make sure that we worked these out together. So you can cut me down a couple minutes because he went ahead and took that, and the fact the boss said that I can't talk about Doug Chase today. And he's nodding. There are some differences in emergency preparedness between the city police department and the county sheriff's department. Most of what Bob talked about would be repeated when it comes to talking about the sheriff's department, and that is one of our strengths. Several of you have heard me talk about that before. One of the things that makes Missoula, Missoula, contrary to a lot of other places in the United States, is the fact that you have the 4 of us at this table. You have Don Whalen and Scott Munoz out there. Raise your hands, guys. With emergency medical services. Emergency services in Missoula recognize the fact that when you need help, you really don't care what color uniform shows up. You just want really good help. And we're committed to that. And Have things changed a lot for us as far as our preparedness strategy since September 11th? And the answer for us is no, because we had a lot of very good things in place. Now, some differences with us, first and foremost, God forbid, should we have it, is that the Sheriff's Department has the challenge of the coroner's responsibility because we are a combined office. So Doug is the sheriff coroner, and that would be significant. One of the others that again, we hope we don't need to take out of the normal routine would be search and rescue. And finally, the fact that our operation is much more rural in our primary role. It would be urban in our support role. And was that a sign from the 60s, or do I have 2 minutes left? Of all the people in this room, you're the one I couldn't resist doing that to. Because I know better. So if you take the normal law enforcement role and the normal Montana law enforcement role, combine coroner, add in search and rescue, and take a look at some of the rural aspects, and then with that mix, the things that Chief Deeds and Chief Lindstrom will talk about today, I'm very comfortable, folks, in telling you that we're prepared for the normally abnormal that will happen in Missoula anyway, and we are also as prepared as we can get for both the unknown and the unexpected. Well, I told you to cut me back a minute because Bob took a minute. So with that, I'll sit down and let the chief stand up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce our Missoula Fire Department Chief, Bob Deeds. He was born in Ohio, started his career in 1969 as a volunteer fireman, decided he wanted to move west, and he ended up in Boise and worked there from 1976 on, working himself up into various positions all the way to captain. He was a member of the International Association of Firefighters and the local Firefighters Union. He was a member of the executive board, negotiating team, and chairman of safety and grievance committees. In 1990, he was promoted to deputy chief in charge of personnel and training, and in 1998, Bob joined the Missoula Fire Department as the first chief from outside Missoula. He's an active member of the Missoula Downtown's Lions Club, chair of the Missoula County 911 Advisory Board and local emergency planning committees, and active in various professional associations. Bob and his wife Karen have 4 grown children. Please join with me in welcoming Bob Deeds.
Thanks, Vicki. Greetings to all of you. I can't imagine how I could top these 2 law enforcement chief officers. I'm honored to be here today and have this opportunity to speak with you. Before I talk about emergency preparedness, I want to give you a quick snapshot about the Missoula Fire Department. We are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day operation, and counting me, we have 76 full-time employees. Besides administration, we have 5 other divisions: operations, training, emergency medical services, fire prevention, and maintenance. Outside the department, we have a medical director and a fire department chaplain. We operate out of 4 fire stations, a boathouse. We have 16 pieces of equipment and apparatus. All stations are staffed with a minimum of 3 personnel on duty 24 hours a day. With our on-duty supervisor, that's the battalion chief, the guy in the red Suburban, we have 13 people on duty at all times. Our annual budget's $5.43 million. With the exception of community donations and grants, totaling about $25,000, all of our funding comes from general tax fund. In 2001's calendar year, the department responded to 4,266 calls for emergency service. That's a record for us. We are part of a planned tiered community response for all medical emergencies. Between 50 and 60% of all of our calls are medical calls. All of our personnel are trained to provide either basic life support or advanced life support. Time is a critical factor in our ability to effectively respond to an emergency and make a positive difference in the outcome. As it's been said, nothing has been the same for any of us since September 11th, 2001. Like you, my personal life has changed as an American, but also my professional role as a fire chief changed. I have professionally seen the destruction caused by earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, fires, incidents involving hazardous materials, airplane crashes, and the list goes on. I thought I'd seen just about everything until the morning of September 11th. If a 757 or similar aircraft would fly into the Wilma Building or the Millennium, we'd simply be overwhelmed. Today, nothing is taken at the Missoula Fire Department as routine. After listening to both Chief Weaver and Under Sheriff McMeekin, and also listening to and reading about the State of the Union address by President Bush just 2 days ago, I know that you're all well aware of the continued threat of terrorism and where we may be vulnerable. Could it happen here in Missoula? And we sure hope not. You need to know, and it's been talked about, that since September 11th, we have responded to 45 calls relating to a white powdery substance or that fear of anthrax and other similar related incidents. Thank goodness, to date, all tests have been negative. Are we prepared? The answer is yes and no. No, in that we don't have the depth and breadth of the services like New York City. No, in that we don't have a seemingly endless supply of personnel and staffing and other resources. But yes, we are prepared, and we do have plans, and we have a planning process to handle natural and person-caused disasters. Acts of terrorism are part of that list as well. Our city-county Office of Emergency Services, that was spoken to earlier, is the agency responsible for disaster and emergency preparedness. Jane Ellis is the person who's ultimately responsible to coordinate our overall planning, and she ensures that we have a plan and it's functional. She's not alone. City County Health Department, Missoula Police Department, Missoula Emergency Services Incorporated, County Sheriff's Office, County Fire Districts, the Red Cross, and our City Fire Department are all involved in the process. Also, city and county elected officials, community hospital and St. Pat's Hospital, local industry, utilities, the Missoula International Airport, and many other local and state and federal agencies are involved. As many of you know and heard, we have a joint regional response team. Thanks to Chief Lindstrom's Fire Department and the Missoula Fire Department, we take up the majority of the equipment and staffing. Probably, I believe our biggest and greatest challenge is the ability to exercise our plan and at the same time assure emergency response is still available. That translates into effective planning, overtime dollars for personnel, and the coordination with all other agencies. You've asked, what can you all do to help? We need your continued support, your cooperation, your generous donations, and your continued tax support. The training and equipment that President Bush identified as a funding priority is great, but we also need firefighters to do the job. We're being stretched. We can't continue to do much more with less. My vision of the future is to be the best fire department in the state of Montana. My goal is to assure that we have available time to do the necessary planning to make sure our readiness to respond to any kind of situation. We must also secure additional funding for training, apparatus, and equipment, along with personnel, to assure that we have the resources to respond to the many challenges that we face today and also in the future. Lastly, my goal is to continue to build relationships and strengthen those, irregardless of jurisdiction, to assure public safety. Should an incident involving hazardous materials, a weapon of mass destruction incident, or some terrorist act take place that places our hazmat response team into a let's roll status, we need to assure that our community is well protected. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak to all of you, and thanks too for giving recognition to your firefighters. They deserve that and need and support your appreciation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Bill Lindstrom. Bill was born and raised in Lake Stevens, Washington, and left the area after high school graduation and joined the U.S. Navy, where he served 4 years on active duty. He ended up in California, got an education as in police science in Hollister, California, worked as a police officer and also as a deputy sheriff. Said he was out of public service for a while. After returning to Washington State, owned an automobile dealership and then came back to law enforcement as a deputy sheriff. He moved to Missoula, worked as a public safety officer at our Missoula County Airport, and in 1980 joined the Missoula Fire District as a rookie firefighter. He graduated from Executive Development 2 program at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and presently serves as fire chief of the Missoula Rural Fire District. He and his wife Sandy have 2 grown children. Please join with me in welcoming Bill Lindstrom.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of the Chamber asking me to be here today. I probably can cut this way short for Gary, having followed 3 distinguished emergency services heads like I just have. We've covered just about everything I was going to say. I'd like to take this time. I believe Kurt Belts is my assistant chief, and without him I would probably fail. He's out in the audience here somewhere. He's takes care of my operations and oversees the fire marshal's office. I think what I'll do is just give you kind of a thumbnail sketch of Missoula Rural Fire. Probably some of you are saying, who is Missoula Rural Fire? What do they do? We're a full-service fire department, much like Bob Deeds talked about the city's role. We fill the same role in an area that encompasses about 90 square miles in and around the city of Missoula, as far south as Lolo and as far east as the Bonner Milltown area, and as west out to the Y. So we're responsible for all the areas around the city that aren't the city. They're not in the incorporated area. Missoula Rural Fire District began as a concept in 1960 when a group of concerned citizens west of the city limits identified a lack of organized fire protection as one of their top priorities. And at that time, the city limits were kind of, on the west side, were kind of a fuzzy line between Orange Street and Russell Street. So at the time, that was the city limits, and I think Mount Street on the south end and probably 39th are in that area on the east. Petitions were circulated in June of 1961. Missoula Rural Fire District opened for business in a rented garage on South 3rd in that time frame. Missoula Rural Fire District has grown to become the largest, most progressive fire district in the state. As I alluded to before, it has 5 stations located in 90 square miles in and around the city of Missoula. We currently have 32 full-time employees and staff and maintain 50 volunteer firefighters trained to state and federal guidelines. Missoula Rural Fire District works tirelessly to maintain an optimum standard of readiness. It's concerned that the people it protects receive up-to-date, state-of-the-art response is the driving factor that leads it to seek out, within budget, new and better ways of doing business. One of the things that Missoula Rural Fire District has probably been involved in quite heavily is, since about the mid-'80s, is hazardous material response. The Board of Trustees at that particular time recognized that this area was probably without a viable response to hazardous materials and instructed the chief at the time to move forward with that plan. I think for a long time, Missoula Rural Fire District fielded the only hazardous materials team in the state. Now we have 5 others across the state, as other communities have seen the need for a hazardous materials team. We as an agency work closely with our local planning committee and disaster planning committee, the Missoula County Fire Protection Association, and numerous state and federal agencies to ensure a continued state of readiness through training and education. As previously mentioned, the hazardous materials team is presently a part of the state of Montana's regional response plan. We are currently trying to secure funding for a second response vehicle in order to maintain local response capabilities in the event that we are called to respond to areas outside of this jurisdiction. Our biggest hurdle is to work out agreed upon funding with the state of Montana so that this response is not borne on the backs of local taxpayers. While we continue to train in this area of response for weapons of mass destruction incidents, it is a relatively new focus for fire agencies as a result of the recent events of September 11th. The one thing that has become clear is the fact that one agency cannot stand alone. Together with all area agencies as well as local and state planning, we will continue to move forward into these uncharted waters. Gary tells me my time is up, so thank you very much for bearing with me.
Okay, we have left some time and opportunities for questions, and we have some microphones we can pass down, so any show of hands, any questions for any of our speakers? Doug? Microphone's on its way.
I rarely need one. You know, I don't really have a question, but I would just like to compliment. Missoula is full of incredible, outstanding people. The arts, the sciences, and the humanities, the talent is amazing. But when we take a look at our protective agencies and the abilities that they brought to our community, we ought to feel awful safe and secure. Nobody can be safe from a nut who's in control of a 757. But I think the fact that our police agencies and our firefighters have done such an outstanding job. Evidence, Chief Weaver, in the fact that you're going to be at the Olympics. Evidence, Under Sheriff McMeekin, that you have Doug Chase. Evidence, I would say, that to you two firefighters, and I don't know if a lot of you know, that we won the Olympics of firefighterdoms at the Firefighter Challenge, and that's at the world level. And I hope we would all give these people and their supporting crews and teams a big round of applause.
I've got a question for Mike. In the class that we're taking, you've stressed how big the county is and your response area that you have to take care of. Could you give us some idea how you respond to an incident, say up in the Seeley Lake or Condon area, which is a long ways from your base of support? As long as I don't knock over just about everything on the table, sir.
Right through the cookies. Typically we have, yes, you're right, as far as the geographic size of our area, as I told you last week, we're 1.25 times the size of the state of Delaware. We're a big county. We have 2 resident deputies normally, one in the Seeley Lake area, one in the Condon area. We have lost the services of our Condon area reserve, the resident deputy, for an undetermined amount of time. He's one of the 4 that we have now in Operation Enduring Freedom. And so he's with the Marine Corps. So we're filling in right now by pulling a deputy out of Missoula and bringing him that way. The only other backup is from Missoula. So if they get a call where they require backup, like a lot of other rural law enforcement in the state, they respond alone, and we help from Missoula if we can. With these roads, you can have a good idea of how long that will be.
Go ahead.
I would like to direct a question to the fire departments. In particular, the city department, fire department. Have you been involved in the transportation plan, and how do you feel about the proposed roundabouts?
Put me on the spot, huh? We're not on a daily basis directly involved with the transportation plan, although we do get invitations to participate. Most recently, we were contacted by the Office of Planning and Grants to to work on that program. The fire marshal and myself will both be participating. The assistant chief, who I failed to recognize, is in the audience also. Assistant Chief Earl Hall. Earl, you want to say hi, please, for a moment? He's also been actively involved with our master planning process. And some of you don't know that we have been in about 6 meetings now, and there are a couple of folks in the room that have served as our community review panel. And at some point, all the documents are used to project where those roadways are going to be. We've looked at the transportation plan at the airport and the expansion of the airport. And so the answer to the question is, we're doing our best, but again, we only have so many people. The other portion of your question, as you can see, I'm getting gray, I've forgotten. That was? Roundabouts. Unfortunately, at least from our perspective and from the information and the research that we've gathered, and I have to give credit to our Fire Prevention Bureau, specifically our Assistant Fire Marshal, Nate Lunley. He's done a tremendous amount of research, and that's led to our position that says that for the most part, that's not going to work for us. It seems to jam up traffic. It seems to rather confuse motorists as well as pedestrians, and also causes a problem for us because we typically, when we can, work with a water company to locate fire hydrants at intersections, and that presents us a difficult problem because there really isn't an intersection. Chief, did you want to?
No, it's nice to be last, but you say it so eloquently. I have the same concerns.
You're too nice, thanks.
Chief Lindstrom, with the growth of the city bounds, have you found a restriction on your budget?
On my budget? It does impact the budget, and for the first time, well, those of you that have been around here for any length of time can remember the strained relationships between Missoula Rural and the city of Missoula. And I can say that in the past year, Mayor Cadis has recognized that, and we've sat down in meetings to try and iron out some of those problems before we get to them. I'm looking forward to being able to overcome some of that in the future.
Any other questions? Okay, in conclusion, just want to reiterate one thing. We changed the format this year, if those of you may have recollected from previous years, to include our law enforcement and fire officials, specifically this year in recognition of the incredible job that they have done for all of us. So I'd like all of you to once again join me with applause for the whole group of speakers. To all of you, thank you for spending your time here with us. We truly appreciate it. Thank you for the tremendous job you've done, and thanks to all of you for coming. Let us know how we can help. Good day.
I journey? Homeward now shall I journey, homeward upon the rainbow. Homeward now shall I journey, homeward upon the rainbow. Life unending and beyond it, yea, homeward now shall I journey. Joy unchanging and beyond it, yea, homeward now shall I journey. Yea, homeward now shall I journey. Yea, homeward now shall I journey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.